The cold gavel struck like thunder across the marble courtroom. "Order!" Judge Eliza Marlowe barked, her voice trembling ever so slightly. Cameras from every major network zoomed in, catching every flicker of her expression. The media frenzy had reached fever pitch outside the courthouse, and the nation held its collective breath. Today's verdict was not just another high-profile trial, it was an earthquake in Washington, D.C. Sitting in the defendant's chair with an almost unnerving calm was Kash Patel, recently appointed director of the FBI under President Donald Trump's second term. A longtime loyalist, former prosecutor, and intelligence veteran, Patel had long been known as a warrior in the trenches fighting bureaucracy, taking on the intelligence community's deep-rooted culture, and dismantling what he publicly referred to as the two-tier justice system. The lawsuit against him wasn't criminal, not directly, but civil. The Department of Justice, spurred on by internal whistleblower allegations and relentless pressure from Democratic lawmakers, had accused Patel of gross misconduct, targeted surveillance of political operatives, and abuse of classified programs. The irony was glaring. Patel had always been the one warning the country about intelligence weaponization, and now they were accusing him of the very thing he fought against. Judge Marlowe's voice echoed again. After review of all material evidence and considering the breach of federal procedural conduct regarding protected political surveillance, the court finds Director Kash Patel personally liable. A pause. And issues a fine in the amount of $500 million for constitutional violations and punitive damages. The courtroom gasped. A murmur ran through the gallery like a wildfire. Kash Patel didn't flinch. He simply blinked, then looked down for a moment, as if absorbing the weight of what had just happened. Beside him, his legal counsel sat stunned. No one had expected such an astronomical fine. It was the kind of figure that bankrupted nations, not individuals. Judge Marlowe, a known critic of Trump-era policies, kept her tone composed, but those close enough could see the inner conflict in her eyes. She hadn't wanted it to come to this. The truth was, her chambers had received death threats. Protesters and patriots alike lined the streets outside. And most importantly, she knew something few others did. The classified memo Patel submitted in his final defense was haunting. Kash rose. The judge nodded, permitting him to speak. "Your Honor," he began, his voice resonating with confidence and quiet strength. "I will not appeal this ruling, not because I agree with it, because I don't, but because I believe Americans deserve to see what happens when truth becomes a threat to power." The judge's eyes flickered. "I was appointed by the president to clean out the rot in the intelligence community. The same rot that has lied to the public, surveilled its own citizens, and played judge, jury, and executioner behind closed doors." He paused. "I did what no one else would. I exposed the abuses. I opened the files. I shined a light where others feared to look. And now, for doing exactly that, for exposing the system, I'm being punished." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge didn't move. "You can fine me, Your Honor. You can try to bury me in legal fees. But I will not apologize for protecting the Constitution. And I will not stop until every American knows what we uncovered." Then, almost gently, he placed a large, sealed envelope on the bench. "This is the rest of the truth. Declassified. Names, dates, operations, all of it. And it's already been delivered to major news outlets." Marlowe's hands trembled as she reached for the envelope. She opened it and glanced inside. Suddenly, her breath caught. Her eyes widened. She scanned the first few pages and her face drained of color. "No," she whispered almost involuntarily. The court stenographer paused, unsure whether to record the moment. Kash continued, "I tried to go through the right channels. I tried to protect people. But when the system protects itself instead of the people it serves, it ceases to be a democracy, it becomes something else." Judge Marlowe lowered the envelope and the courtroom could now see her shaking. She stared at Patel, not with contempt, not with anger, but something far more unsettling. Guilt, and then tears. Silent, sudden, unrelenting. It wasn't just a ruling anymore. It was a reckoning. As the courtroom descended into stunned silence, the media cameras were temporarily muted by the bailiff's order. But what they couldn't mute was the collective tension that had seized the air like a vice. Judge Eliza Marlowe sat frozen. Her eyes, bloodshot and misting over with tears, remained locked on the document that Kash Patel had just handed over, a document that threatened to rewrite the narrative Washington had worked so hard to protect. The envelope was thicker than expected, its contents meticulously categorized and labeled: Operation Fortress, Internal NSA Task Force 9, Black Site Domestic Intel Surveillance, and most disturbingly, Media Coordinated Manipulation Protocols MCMP. Kash stood with quiet authority, watching her unravel. He had seen it before, not often, but a few times in his career. When someone in power realized the full magnitude of the truth and the role they unknowingly played in covering it up. "I wanted to avoid this," he said softly, no longer speaking to the gallery or the cameras, but directly to Judge Marlowe. "But you left me no choice. The moment you allowed this trial to proceed, knowing what was in the sealed exhibits, you made yourself a part of it." The judge shook her head slowly, whispering as if to herself. "I didn't know, not all of it." "You knew enough," Kash replied firmly. "You knew the surveillance authorizations weren't just flawed, they were criminal. You saw the signed orders that bypassed FISA courts. You saw the budget lines hidden in interagency contracts. And you saw the names. The room hung on that last word. The names. The ones buried deep in encrypted files. Senior officials. Media executives. Elected leaders. Even judges." She folded her hands as if praying or bracing. "I thought I was protecting the integrity of this court," Marlowe said, her voice cracking. "I believed the narrative. That you were overreaching, politicizing the Bureau. I didn't realize." Kash leaned in slightly. "You didn't realize they were using you, Judge. Like they use everyone." There was a soft but distinct sound, a camera shutter from one of the still photographers in the press row. The judge looked up sharply, suddenly aware of her vulnerability. "I need a recess," she announced, trying to regain composure. 10 minutes. But Kash wasn't finished. "You can call a recess, Your Honor. But you can't stop what's already happening. The files have been uploaded to servers across multiple countries. Every mainstream news outlet already has them, and several independent journalists as well. You can jail me, bankrupt me. But the truth is no longer confined to these four walls." The gavel came down sharply. "Recess. Now." The courtroom stirred as Judge Marlowe stood and retreated into her chambers, the sealed envelope still clutched in her trembling hands. Outside, the streets of D.C. were chaos. Protesters, supporters, conspiracy theorists, and journalists all packed together like sardines. Giant screens on nearby buildings flashed, breaking. Kash Patel fined $500 million, drops bombshell documents in court. Inside a dark van parked 2 blocks away, CIA veteran Ethan Grant watched the proceedings on a secure satellite feed. A scowl etched across his hardened features. "We've got a problem," he said into his earpiece. He wasn't bluffing. "The files are real." "Containment?" a voice crackled back. Ethan shook his head. "Too late. We underestimated him. He played the long game." Back in the courthouse, as Judge Marlowe sat alone with the documents, scanning, crying, and whispering names she recognized, she realized that what Kash had done wasn't just about justice. It was about redemption. For the system. For the country. And maybe even for her. Judge Eliza Marlowe didn't emerge from her chambers for nearly half an hour. When she finally stepped back into the courtroom, her robe slightly disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed, the room fell deathly silent. She looked different. Gone was the cold posture of a legal titan dishing out a $500 million punishment. In its place stood a woman visibly broken by the weight of truth, a truth that, until now, she had managed to keep at bay behind walls of legalese, doctrine, and deference to the so-called experts within the intelligence community. She spoke in a whisper. "Mr. Patel, please approach." Kash stepped forward. "Calm. Steady." Marlowe glanced at the sealed files still resting beside her. "You've turned the entire justice system upside down in less than an hour." "I didn't do it," Kash replied. "The system did it to itself. I just held up the mirror." The courtroom erupted as reporters began pushing out real-time updates on social media. Just outside the courthouse, a CNN broadcast was airing live commentary. The anchor, trying to keep a neutral tone, couldn't hide the tremble in her voice. "We're getting word that several major intelligence files dropped by FBI Director Patel have been independently verified and contain directives targeting civilian groups and private individuals, including members of the media. This is unprecedented." The cheer blared. Patel files expose domestic intel programs, DC in shock. Meanwhile, across the nation, social media exploded. #PatelTruth and #Judge Marlowe were trending. Conservative commentators lauded him as a hero. Civil liberties groups demanded congressional investigations. And inside the White House, President Donald Trump sat in the Oval Office watching the coverage with narrowed eyes. He leaned over to his chief of staff. "I told everyone," Trump growled, "they said Kash was dangerous. I told them he's dangerous to them. Not to us." Back in court, Judge Marlowe cleared her throat. "I'm suspending the financial enforcement of the ruling," she said quietly, unable to meet Kash's gaze. "Until a federal review panel evaluates these documents." "You're stalling," Kash replied bluntly. "But it doesn't matter anymore. You think this ends with me?" Marlowe's voice rose defensively. "This is not about stalling, this is about legal process." "No," Kash said, "this is about damage control." She slammed her gavel. "This court is in recess until further notice." But as Kash turned away, an official from the Department of Justice burst into the room waving a digital tablet. "Your Honor," he called out, panting. "We have a situation, a massive document leak, more than what Mr. Patel submitted." Kash didn't flinch. "Like I said, I'm not the only one." The DOJ official tapped on the tablet, showing a list of files now being shared globally. Operation Covert Strings, DEPSCREEN, Mockingbird 2.0, public image filters, hundreds of classified projects that had never been disclosed, each tied directly to unconstitutional surveillance, media manipulation, and high-level corruption. One name appeared repeatedly: Ethan Grant, the ex-CIA Black Operations Chief, now allegedly running rogue counterintelligence efforts to suppress whistleblowers, including Patel himself. Back in the van, Ethan stared at the leak reports on his secure monitor. "They didn't just open the vault," he muttered. "They're burning the whole thing down." He dialed a number. "Activate the sleeper protocol. I want Kash Patel silenced. Tonight." But unknown to Ethan, his call was being monitored by Patel's own counterintelligence team, quietly embedded inside the system he once trusted. Back inside the courthouse, Kash stopped just before leaving the courtroom. He turned to the gallery, speaking now not to the judge, but to the people, the American public watching live. "You asked for transparency. You asked for justice. You asked for someone to stand up when everyone else stayed quiet. Well, here I am." He raised a finger. "Don't just believe me. Read the files. Know the truth for yourself. Then decide who's really guilty here." And with that, he walked out of the courtroom to a wall of flashing cameras, chants, and questions. But one thing was clear. This was no longer about a $500 million fine. This was the beginning of a national awakening. The sun had just dipped below the Washington skyline, casting long shadows over the Capitol. But the shadows now held more than just metaphor. They hid danger and intent. Kash Patel, now escorted by a pair of armed U.S. Marshals, exited through the courthouse's underground parking tunnel. Protesters and supporters swarmed the plaza above. Media drones hovered in the air. The entire nation seemed to be holding its breath. He got into a black SUV. "Route confirmed. Safe House Echo 9. One of the marshals said. "Fast and dark." But Kash, never one to trust protocol blindly, turned toward the back window and muttered, "Too obvious. Divert to Site Delta." The marshal hesitated. "Sir, we were instructed by—" "Do it," Kash interrupted. "We're being watched." He was right. Far above, in a high-rise across from the federal building, Ethan Grant stood behind a sniper spotter team. The van hadn't left the area. His jaw clenched as he listened to the update from his internal operative. Patel changed route. "He's not going to Echo 9. "Doesn't matter," Ethan growled. "Activate Kestrel." "Sir, Kestrel hasn't been greenlit in years." "It's greenlit now." Within moments, a separate team embedded along the new route sprang into motion. Disguised as a construction crew, they were parked near Lincoln Circle, less than 4 miles from the Capitol. But Kash had been 10 steps ahead the entire time. Inside the SUV, he pulled out a secure satellite phone and dialed. Phase 2. Activate surveillance inversion. Across the city, NSA engineers and rogue tech operatives loyal to the constitutional mission, not to the deep state machine, rerouted street surveillance and tapped into encrypted radio feeds used by Ethan's team. Every move the assassins made was now being watched by Kash's people. A drone, disguised as a local news camera, hovered silently above the Lincoln Circle work zone. It captured everything. The assault rifle in the tool chest, the wired detonation pack under the drainage grate, and a familiar face, one of the crew, had appeared in a leaked file labeled Domestic Neutralizer. The footage was streamed live to multiple global servers with backup mirrors and played in real time on Newsmax, OAN, and Twitter/X before anyone could stop it. Back at the White House, President Donald Trump stood watching with narrowed eyes. "He's baiting them," Trump muttered. "Smart." His national security advisor shifted uneasily. "Sir, if these assassination squads are confirmed." "They are," Trump interrupted. "And if Patel survives the night, we'll need to clean house like never before." From the top down. Meanwhile, in a nondescript building just off Georgetown, a high-level meeting of media executives, intelligence liaisons, and one former senator was descending into chaos. "We told you not to poke Patel," a red-faced executive from a major cable network yelled. "This wasn't the plan." "You think I control Grant? He's gone rogue," snapped the ex-senator. But it was too late. Kash Patel was now the face of resistance against the swamp. And worse, for them, he was alive. Back in the SUV, Kash turned toward the marshal beside him. "You have a family?" The man nodded cautiously. "Good," Kash said. "I'm fighting for them too." Suddenly, the comms unit crackled. "Director Patel, this is Sky Eye. The Kestrel unit has been neutralized. No casualties. Full exposure online. World's watching." Kash closed his eyes, just for a moment. The hardest part was yet to come. Because tomorrow he'd go before Congress. Not to plead innocence, but to testify under oath about the most comprehensive domestic surveillance and propaganda campaign in U.S. history. And every name would be named. No redactions. No sealed files. No mercy. Judge Marlowe, sitting alone in her chambers with trembling hands, watched the news as video of the assassination squad played on a loop. She whispered, "Dear God, what have we done?" The Capitol was surrounded by armed guards, but not the kind Kash Patel feared. These were honest veterans pulled in by an executive order signed by President Donald Trump just hours earlier, a last-minute security maneuver after intelligence reports indicated another threat on Patel's life. The previous night's failed ambush had confirmed what many suspected. This wasn't just about silencing a man. It was about stopping a movement. Kash walked through the marbled halls of Congress in a navy blue suit, his FBI badge still pinned to his belt, battered, scraped, but visible. He passed walls where portraits of legendary figures hung, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Reagan. But the man who mattered most now sat waiting in the presidential observation chamber, hidden behind reinforced glass. Donald Trump watched silently as Patel entered the congressional hearing room. It was packed. All 435 House seats. A dozen senators. National security advisors. Journalists. And behind them, millions watching online, from Texas ranch homes to New York City apartments, and even U.S. troops stationed abroad. The hearing was titled, "Restoring the Republic, the Patel Files Testimony." The chair, Congresswoman Valerie Cortez, banged her gavel. "This hearing will come to order. Mr. Patel, please rise and raise your right hand." Kash stood. "Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." He sat down and pulled out a thick binder labeled Volume 1, Constitutional Violations and Covert Programs. The room tensed. He opened it. "For decades," Kash began, "the American people have been fed a lie that intelligence agencies work for them. But I've seen the documents. I've seen the systems. And I've seen the orders. The truth is we've all been manipulated." He paused, eyes sweeping the room. Operation Deep Screen was not just about surveillance. It was about behavioral shaping. It controlled algorithms, media headlines, and even academic grants, all engineered to favor certain narratives and crush others. One congressman scoffed. "Are you suggesting the FBI was involved in mind control?" Patel didn't blink. "Not suggesting. I'm stating. And not just the FBI, the CIA, DHS, and key players inside Silicon Valley were co-authors." He clicked a button on the table, projecting documents to the screen behind him. One showed direct communications between a federal contractor and a senior editor at a top media outlet, negotiating headline framing strategies for election year coverage. Another showed funds funneled into fake fact-checking NGOs used to discredit whistleblowers. The final slide stopped everyone cold. An unredacted email chain between Ethan Grant and a handful of senators, instructing them to block Patel's appointment, and later to approve his indictment. The room exploded. Gasps, yells. Journalists bolted out to file breaking news. But Kash wasn't finished. I was fined $500 million for refusing to hide these truths. But I wasn't punished, I was silenced. The real criminals are the ones who weaponized our government against its people. And they're sitting in this room. Several officials stood up in protest. One stormed out. Congresswoman Cortez leaned into the mic, clearly shaken. We will review this material under closed session and... Kash interrupted. No more closed doors. That's how we got here. The people don't need filtered truth. They need unfiltered exposure. A voice rang out from the back. It was President Trump, stepping from the secure glass chamber. Let him speak. Cortez, stunned, looked to security. They did nothing. Trump walked forward, took a seat beside Patel, and said, "You wanted the truth? It's sitting right here. You gonna listen to him, or do I need to invoke the Insurrection Act and clean this mess myself?" Dead silence. Then applause. Thunderous, spontaneous, from the gallery and beyond. It spilled out of the chamber and into the streets of Washington. Across the country. Across the world. For the first time in decades, Americans weren't divided by red or blue. They were united by something more powerful: betrayal. And hope. Epilogue. Judge Eliza Marlowe tendered her resignation 2 days later. In her handwritten letter, she wrote, "I failed the Constitution, but I won't fail my conscience." Ethan Grant disappeared from radar, but he didn't get far. 2 weeks later, he was captured during an extraction attempt in Argentina. He now sits in a black site, not the kind he used to control, but one under Patel's new Bureau of Constitutional Integrity, formed by executive order. The $500 million fine? Overturned. Instead, Congress awarded Kash Patel the Medal of Freedom with bipartisan support. And when asked what he would do next, Patel said, "I'm not running for anything. I'm running towards something a country worth saving."